This isn't a breakup story. It's a story of a woman's silence and the deafening explosion that followed. What if the woman you saw on the subway, the one who looks tired, broke, and invisible, is actually a ghost? Clara Vance gave her boyfriend Mark everything she had left. And when he stole her last $800, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply packed one small bag, left her key on the table, and walked out. She left him without a single complaint. Because hours later, that same woman in a Tom Ford suit walked into a $90 million penthouse with a billionaire who was waiting for her. The silence was the loudest thing in the apartment. It was 11:04 a.m. on a Tuesday. Outside their Hell's Kitchen apartment, New York City was committing its usual symphony of violent sirens, a distant jackhammer, the shriek of a bus's air brakes. But inside apartment 4B, the only sound was the damp rhythmic snoring of Mark Jennings. Clara Vance stood in the center of the 400-square-foot studio, a single worn-out leather duffel bag at her feet. She was already packed. It hadn't taken long. Mark was exactly where she'd left him 8 hours ago, passed out on the lumpy, beer-stained sofa they'd found on a curb. His lank, greasy blonde hair was matted to his face. An empty bottle of Bullet bourbon was tipped over on the floor, a dark, sticky puddle creeping toward the eviction notice on the coffee table. His precious 1974 Fender Stratocaster, the one he claimed was his soul, was propped precariously against a tower of pizza boxes, a string broken and curled like a dead insect. Clara felt nothing. She'd spent the last 734 days feeling everything. She'd felt hope when he'd written a song just for her. She'd felt shame when she had to borrow money from her coworker at the diner because Mark needed inspiration, which always cost $60 and came in a bottle. She'd felt terror when he'd smashed a plate near her head, screaming about how the world couldn't see his genius. And she'd felt a deep, hollow exhaustion as she worked double shifts to cover the rent he was supposed to split. But last night, the feeling had just stopped. It was the rent money. $800. She had saved it in cash, hidden in an old copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. It was the only thing she owned that he'd never touch. He famously said, "Reading is for people who've given up on living." Yesterday she'd come home from her 14-hour shift, her feet swollen and her back aching to find the book on the floor, its pages ripped out. The money was gone. Mark, already drunk, had slung an arm around her. "Baby, you won't believe it. This producer, the guy Rick Rubin's protege, heard my demo. He said I'm the next Cobain. He just needed a good faith deposit for studio time. $800. Can you believe it? Our ship has come in, Clara." Clara had looked at his bloodshot eyes, at the pathetic, desperate lie clinging to his lips. She had worked 70 hours for that $800. It was for their landlord, Mr. Petrov, a stern man who had already given them 2 extensions. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't list his failures, his broken promises, his casual cruelty. She didn't say, "What about the producer from last month who took $500, or the A&R guy before that?" She simply nodded. She picked up the ruined book. She went into the tiny mold-speckled bathroom, showered, and went to bed, her back to him as he mumbled about the Grammys and a house in the hills. She hadn't slept. She had just waited. She waited for the sound of his breathing to deepen, for the bourbon bottle to hit the floor, for the sun to rise. And now, at 11:04 a.m., it was time. Her bag contained 3 items, a set of cheap black clothes, her toothbrush, and a small cracked photo of a dark-haired woman on a sailboat, the Mediterranean Sea, a brilliant blue behind her. Clara walked to the coffee table. She nudged the eviction notice so it was front and center. Then she took her key, her last key, the one he hadn't lost, off its ring, and placed it neatly on top of the red final notice text. She looked at him one last time. Mark Jennings. The man she had for a brief, foolish time convinced herself was a project, a brilliant, broken soul she could save. A small, bitter smile touched her lips. He wasn't a project. He was an anchor. And she was done with the ocean floor. She was so quiet that the apartment's dust motes dancing in the single shaft of sunlight didn't seem to stir. She opened the door, stepped into the hallway that smelled of stale curry and damp, and pulled the door shut. The click of the deadbolt sliding into place was finite. It was the sound of an ending. She left him without a single complaint. She didn't look back. The B train was crowded hot and smelled of body odor and burnt sugar. Clara stood near the doors holding the overhead rail. Her worn-out jeans fraying at the cuffs and her thin gray hoodie made her invisible. She was just another piece of the city's exhausted, shuffling biomass. People pressed against her, their faces buried in phones, their eyes glazed. No one saw her. This invisibility had been her shield for 2 years. Today it was a costume she was about to shed. She rode the train for 40 minutes, a journey that felt like crossing dimensions. She got off, not in a residential neighborhood, but at 57th and 7th. The sudden rush of wealth and polished surfaces was jarring. Tourists clogged the sidewalks and the air smelled different, cleaner, laced with expensive perfume and exhaust from black cars. Clara walked 2 blocks, her pace quickening, her posture changing with every step. Her shoulders, which had been hunched in the apartment, began to straighten. Her chin lifted. She didn't stop at the gleaming, sterile lobby of a glass tower. She turned into a smaller, discreet limestone building and entered a salon that had no sign, only a small engraved brass plate, Felix. The moment she stepped onto the white marble floor, the receptionist, a painfully chic woman named Chloe, with a severe black bob, looked up from her screen. Her professional smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion and distaste as she took in Clara's clothes. "Can I help you?" Clara met her gaze. She didn't say anything, just held the woman's stare. Chloe's eyes widened a tiny spark of recognition. "My God, Ms. Vance." "Hello, Chloe," Clara said. Her voice was different. The slightly rough, hurried cadence of her diner worker persona was gone. In its place was a low, smooth, and chillingly aristocratic alto. "Of course, right this way. We've had the suite on standby for you." Chloe was flustered, tripping over her words as she led Clara through the main salon where women with $10,000 handbags sipped champagne into a private soundproofed VIP room. The room was waiting. On a rack hung a black garment bag. On a vanity lay a set of brushes and cosmetics that looked like surgical tools. 2 people were waiting, a man with sharp scissors and a sharper suit, and a woman with a makeup case that cost more than Mark's guitar. "Just the re-entry, please, Jean-Pierre," Clara said, dropping her duffel bag. It landed on the plush Persian rug with a pathetic soft thud. For the next 2 hours she was a project. Jean-Pierre set to work washing 2 years of grime, cheap shampoo, and desperation from her hair. He tutted at the split ends at the bad box dye job she'd given herself in her bathroom. With methodical snips, he cut away the Clara Vance persona. He restored the long, strategic layers and brought her color back to its natural deep chestnut, so dark it was almost black, with a sheen that spoke of health and obscene wealth. The makeup artist Anna was next. She didn't apply makeup. She sculpted. She erased the exhaustion, the dark circles from 14-hour shifts, the subtle malnutrition. She defined her high cheekbones, which had been hidden by a sort of willful anonymity. She finished with a shade of deep red lipstick that looked less like a color and more like a warning. Finally, Clara stood and unzipped the garment bag. Inside was a Tom Ford pantsuit. The fabric was a midnight blue wool-silk blend. It wasn't just a suit, it was armor. She shed her jeans and hoodie, leaving them in a pile on the floor like a snakeskin. She slid into the suit, the silk lining cool against her skin. She buttoned the sharp, structured blazer. She slipped her feet, calloused from cheap sneakers, into a pair of black, brutally simple Manolo Blahnik stiletto pumps. She looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was not the girl from apartment 4B. That girl was a ghost of fiction. This woman was terrifying. Her eyes were hard, intelligent, and cold. Her posture was perfect. She was Clara Stavros, and she was back from the dead. "Is the car here?" she asked Chloe, who was hovering by the door. Yes, Ms. Stavros. Mikhail is waiting downstairs. Good. Bill my father's estate account, and Jean-Pierre, she said, turning to the stylist who was admiring his work. Thank you. You're still a magician. It is easy to polish a diamond, mademoiselle, he said with a small bow. Clara walked out of the salon, her heels clicking like punctuation on the marble. The women in the main room looked up, their eyes wide with envy and curiosity. They didn't know who she was, but they knew she was somebody. The black Maybach S680 was idling at the curb, a $300,000 void in the river of yellow cabs. The driver, a large man in a dark suit with the broken-nosed and rebuilt face of an ex-Spetsnaz operative, opened the rear door. Ms. Stavros, Mikhail said, his voice a low rumble. It has been too long. It has, Misha, she said, sliding onto the buttery soft white leather. How is he? Mr. Thorne is impatient, as always. And the package from Geneva? Secured. Clara nodded. The door closed with a pneumatic thump, sealing her off from the noise of the city. The car pulled silently into traffic. She looked out the tinted window at the people on the sidewalk, at the tired-faced woman who looked just like she had 3 hours ago. She had crossed the divide. The chasm between the two worlds was just a car door. The Maybach didn't so much drive as it glided, a silent shark navigating the turbulent waters of midtown traffic. Clara sat perfectly still in the back, the scent of the car's custom Napa leather and her own newly applied Portrait of a Lady perfume by Frederick Malle filling the cabin. The silence was a balm. For 2 years her world had been noise, Mark's endless whining monologues, his loud bad music, the neighbors' screaming matches, the clatter of plates at the diner. This silence was different. It was the silence of power. The thick laminated glass of the Maybach didn't just block sound, it deleted it. They headed south toward the cluster of impossibly thin skyscrapers known as Billionaire's Row. Mikhail pulled the car into a private gated subterranean entrance next to the main doors of 157, the colossal blue glass tower that loomed over Central Park. A private security guard, recognizing the car, nodded and opened an unmarked steel door. It led to a small private elevator lobby paneled in dark-veined marble. Mikhail pressed a single unmarked button. There was no ding. The doors simply slid open, and the elevator began its ascent, moving with a speed that made Clara's stomach drop slightly. The elevator didn't open into a hallway. It opened directly into the sky. The penthouse was 10,000 square feet of glass, steel, and stone, occupying the entire 90th floor. The 24-foot-high windows offered a 360-degree view that owned all of New York, from the Statue of Liberty to the south, to the green rectangular expanse of Central Park, laid out like a carpet to the north. The space was minimalist to the point of being monastic. The floors were poured concrete, polished to a mirror shine. The furniture was sparse and brutalist, a single massive sofa, a few Le Corbusier chairs. On the wall was not a television, but a single massive 12-foot-wide painting, a Mark Rothko, its deep, vibrating fields of crimson and black, a window into some beautiful, terrible void. A man was standing in front of the window looking north over the park. He was tall, thin, and dressed not in a suit, but in the casual, obscenely expensive uniform of the truly powerful, a dark cashmere turtleneck, charcoal Brunello Cucinelli trousers, and soft leather loafers worn without socks. He turned. He was perhaps 60, with a sharp, intelligent face, silver hair swept back, and the pale, unblinking eyes of a hawk. This was Julian Thorne. He was not by traditional definitions a billionaire. He was something far more dangerous, the man who managed billionaires. He was an attorney, a fixer, the executor of the Stavros estate, and the most trusted advisor, the only trusted advisor of Clara's late father, Konstantin Stavros. "You're late," he said. His voice was like dry ice. "The chrysalis phase took longer than anticipated," Clara replied, walking toward him. Her heels echoed in the vast empty space. They didn't hug. They didn't embrace. They stood 3 feet apart, two statues surveying their domain. "It's done then," he stated. "It's done," she confirmed. "I left this morning. Any complications? The asset was Mark." "None. He was asleep. He won't even know I'm gone until he's hungry or sober, whichever comes first." "Good." Julian turned back to the window. Mikhail intercepted the studio producer Mark was so excited about. He was one of Darius's men, a low-level private investigator from Staten Island. Pathetic. Clara felt a cold prickle, but her expression remained neutral. So the apartment was compromised. "It was becoming so," Julian said. "Mark was a security leak from the day you met him, a walking, talking liability. But he was for a time the perfect cover. No one looks for Clara Stavros, heir to a $40 billion shipping and logistics empire, washing dishes at a diner and living with a failed musician in a Hell's Kitchen walk-up." The twist. The great secret. Clara Vance had never existed. She was a construct. A role played by Clara Stavros, the sole daughter of Konstantin Stavros, who had died in a tragic boating accident in the Aegean 2 years and 1 month ago. The accident, Julian had confirmed within hours, was a professional hit orchestrated by Clara's older half-brother, Darius Stavros. Darius, the child of Konstantin's first disastrous marriage, was a creature of pure, uncut greed and entitlement. He saw the company Stavros Global as his birthright, and Clara as a pest to be exterminated. The moment their father was gone, Clara's life was on a timer. Julian Thorne had moved first. While Darius was still celebrating with his lawyers in Geneva, Julian had invoked his power as executor of the estate. He'd kidnapped Clara from her Brown University dorm, liquidated a hidden set of her father's assets, and made her disappear into the anonymous grime of New York City under a new name, a new face, a subtle rhinoplasty and hair dye, and a new life. She was to wait to stay hidden until Julian could legally and logistically dismantle Darius's power. "So," Clara said, moving to stand beside him, "the wait is over." "Yes." Julian allowed himself a thin, dangerous smile. As of 0800 Geneva time, Darius Stavros was arrested by Swiss federal authorities. The charges include 42 counts of wire fraud embezzlement, and thanks to the producer from Staten Island turning state's witness conspiracy to commit murder. Clara closed her eyes for a single second, processing the weight of the words. 2 years. 2 years of her life living in filth, serving greasy eggs to angry truck drivers, pretending to love a man she grew to despise. All of it over. "He's finished," Julian said. "His assets are frozen. His proxies on the board are being removed as we speak. He will never see the outside of a prison again." Clara opened her eyes. The view of Central Park was sharp, clear, and beautiful. "And Mark, Mikhail is paying him a visit this afternoon, a severance package. He doesn't deserve it. It's not for him," Julian said, turning his pale eyes on her. "It's for us. It's the cost of cleaning. We buy his silence, we show him the file we have on his little side deal with Darius's PI, and he vanishes. He'll take the money. Men like Mark always take the money." Clara nodded. She thought of the $800. The rent money. It seemed so small now, a different currency from a different life. "Good. Now," Julian said, gesturing to the vast empty room, "this is yours. A temporary base of operations. The staff is virtual. The security is biometric. You are for the first time in 2 years safe." Clara looked around the cold, beautiful, empty penthouse. "It's just another cage, Julian. A bigger, prettier one." "It's a fortress," he corrected. "And you're not a prisoner anymore. You're a queen. And your kingdom is in ruins. Darius did more damage than I thought." He gestured to a massive dark-wood table. On it sat a single encrypted laptop. "Welcome back to the family, Clara. We have work to do." Clara didn't move toward the laptop. Not yet. Her mind was still catching up to her body. The Tom Ford suit felt like a second skin, but the phantom itch of the cheap polyester uniform she'd worn for 700 days was still there. "He contacted him," Clara said. It wasn't a question. "Darius's man. He didn't just find Mark. He..." Julian's face was impassive. He knew this part would be hard. Darius's people have been running digital dragnets for 2 years. Facial recognition keyword matching. They were looking for anyone who fit your profile. But you were clean. You followed the protocol perfectly. No social media. Cash only. No digital footprint. He paused, then continued. The leak was Mark. It was always going to be Mark. He's weak and he's vain. 2 weeks ago he was drunk and whining on some obscure musician's forum. My girlfriend doesn't get my art. I'm a genius stuck in a shithole. I'm dating way below my level. Standard narcissism. Clara's jaw tightened. She'd heard those exact phrases screamed at her, whispered to his friends on the phone. But then, Julian said, he posted a picture. He was trying to prove to these internet strangers that he could in fact get a hot girl. He posted a photo he'd taken of you sleeping 6 months ago. You thought you'd deleted it. You'd had a fight, he'd taken the photo, and you'd smashed his phone. He apparently saved the SIM card. Clara felt a wave of violation so profound it made her nauseous. She remembered that fight. He'd woken her up at 3 a.m. drunk, demanding she perform for him. She'd refused. He'd gotten angry, called her frigid, and snapped the picture, the flash blinding her. Fine, I'll just show my friends what you're withholding. The phone had shattered against the wall. She'd felt a small victory. A victory that it turned out was a lie. That photo was enough, Julian said, his voice dropping. It was low res, but it was enough. It pinged a facial recognition algorithm Darius was running. Within an hour, they had a maybe. Within a day, they had a PI on your block. The PI, this idiot from Staten Island, needed a way in. So he posed as a music producer. He found Mark at his usual bar. Clara finally walked not to the laptop but to the window. The city below was a blur of tiny, insignificant lights. Mark didn't just believe him, she whispered. No, Julian said, his voice right behind her. He didn't. Not at first. The PI offered him $500 for studio time. Mark took it. Then the PI said he was really interested in Mark's ethereal girlfriend. He said he worked for a private art collector who would pay good money for candid portraits of her. He offered Mark $10,000 for a set of new photos. High resolution. Clara closed her eyes. Mark hesitated, Julian said. He was greedy, but he was also a coward. He was suspicious. So the PI sweetened the deal. He said his boss was also willing to fund an entire album. A $50,000 deal. All he needed was confirmation. Proof of who you were, where you came from. He showed Mark a picture, a real one, of you at your father's side at the Monaco Grand Prix. The memory hit her, her father laughing, his arm around her. She was 19. She was wearing a white sundress and a diamond necklace. She was happy. What did Mark say? Clara asked, her voice dangerously quiet. He said, I fucking knew it. I knew she was lying. He told the PI you were secretive, that you acted all high and mighty, that you thought you were too good for him. He saw it not as a danger, but as a payday. He saw it as confirmation that he was the special one that a princess had hidden away with him. He thought he was about to be rich. The $800. It wasn't for studio time. It was a test. A final, good faith gesture from the PI to Mark. Get me her rent money, the cash she has hidden, and I'll know you're serious. I'll know you can control her. Then we'll talk about the $50,000. And Mark had done it. He had ripped apart her book, Her One Small Sanctuary, and stolen her last dollars. Not for a demo, but to sell her. The silence in the penthouse stretched. Clara watched a tiny jet, a silver needle, stitch its way across the dark velvet sky. The lack of complaint, Julian said softly. When I heard from my surveillance team that you just went to bed, I was worried. I thought he had finally broken you. Clara turned from the window. Her face was a mask of cold white marble. The red lipstick was a slash of violence. Broken me, she said, her voice dripping with an icy venom that would have frozen Mark's blood. He couldn't break me. He wasn't important enough to break me. She looked at Julian. I didn't complain, Julian, because you don't complain about an insect. You don't argue with a cockroach. You just step on it. I was done. His betrayal. This. She gestured, encompassing the whole sordid story. It doesn't surprise me. It's the most predictable thing he's ever done. He was always a parasite. I just didn't know how deep he was trying to burrow. She finally walked to the table. She ran her hand over the cool metallic surface of the laptop. You said he was a pawn, she said. A stupid, greedy one. But yes. I don't want him to have the $10,000 severance. It's a small price to... No. She cut him off. Her authority was absolute. It was the voice of Konstantin Stavros, the man who moved tanker fleets like chess pieces. He doesn't get a reward for trying to sell me. I don't care about the money. I care about the message. He thinks he's about to be rich. He thinks he's getting away with it. No. He gets nothing. Julian studied her. The girl was gone. The woman who stood before him was her father's daughter. What do you propose? He asked. Mikhail is paying him a visit, correct? He's on his way there now. Good. Clara opened the laptop. It booted instantly, asking for no password, only her thumbprint. Tell Mikhail to deliver the restraining order. Tell him to deliver the file on the PI. But the check, I want him to rip it up in Mark's face. I want Mark to know he's getting nothing. Not from Darius and not from me. I want him to be left in that filthy apartment with his broken guitar, his eviction notice, and the knowledge that he fumbled the only thing of value he ever touched. I want him to know that I know. Julian permitted himself another thin smile. I'll make the call. Do it, she said, her eyes already scanning the first document on the screen, a catastrophic Q3 earnings report for Stavros Global. I'm done with the past. It's time to deal with the future. Mark Jennings woke up at 3:17 p.m. His head felt like a cracked porcelain bowl held together by shrinking rawhide. His mouth tasted like an old battery. He groaned, rolling off the sofa, and his bare foot landed directly in the sticky, congealed puddle of bullet. God damn it! He yelled to the empty room. Clara! Clara, clean this up. Silence. Clara. He stumbled to his feet, a wave of vertigo and nausea hitting him. The apartment was oppressively quiet. And bright. Why was it so bright? Babe, where are you? He called, shuffling toward the tiny kitchen. Not there. The bathroom. Empty. A prickle of annoyance, not concern, started in his gut. She was probably at the diner pulling another double. He hated when she did that. It made her tired and cranky, and she never wanted to celebrate his impending success. He staggered back to the living room, rubbing his face, and that's when he saw it. The key. It was sitting on the eviction notice. His heart didn't sink. It leaped into his throat with a cold metallic taste. No, 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 no. He ran to the closet. Her side was empty. The 3 cheap dresses, her diner uniforms, her 1 pair of good shoes, all gone. He ripped open the bathroom cabinet. Her toothbrush, her cheap rose-scented face wash. Gone. She can't, he muttered. He was breathing fast. She can't leave. Not now. Not when I'm this close. His mind wasn't on her, on the 2 years they'd spent on the woman who'd paid his way. His mind was on the $50,000. On the producer. On his album. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking. He had to call Mr. Bellucci, the producer from Staten Island. He had to tell him she'd flaked, but he could find her. He knew her. He found his phone. But before he could dial, his eyes darted to the copy of The Count of Monte Cristo, the place where she kept the rent money. Oh, thank God, he breathed. She left the money. She's just angry. She'll be back. He snatched the book. It was empty. Of course it was empty. He had emptied it. The $800 was gone. Wait, a new dawning horror. He'd given the $800 to Bellucci. Clara had come home. She'd seen the money was gone, and now she was gone. She took the rest! He screamed, tearing the tiny apartment apart. He upended the sofa cushions. He threw her few remaining books. He was looking for a stash. He was convinced she had the rest of the princess's money. There was nothing. Just dust, old receipts, and a single broken guitar pick. He was ruined. Bellucci's $50,000 was contingent on him having Clara. And now not only was she gone, but the landlord, Mr. Petrov, was going to be here any minute. He was broke. He was locked out of his payday. He was... Knock, knock, knock. The sound was like a hammer blow on the door. Mark froze. Mr. Petrov, look, I just need one more day, man. I've got a big deal coming through. The knock came again. Louder. More solid. Not the impatient rap of a landlord. This was a knock of absolute final authority. He crept to the door, looked through the peephole, and his blood turned to ice water. A man was standing there. A very large man in a very black suit. He looked less like a man and more like a refrigerator wrapped in tailoring. His nose was crooked, his expression blank. "Who are you?" Mark squeaked through the door. "Mr. Jennings," a voice rumbled. It was the man from the peephole, Mikhail. "I have a delivery for you from Ms. Vance." From Clara. A wave of relief so powerful it made him weak washed over Mark. She'd sent someone. She'd sent money. Of course she was just testing him. She'd probably been at a hotel this whole time waiting for him to beg. This guy. This was her family's driver. This was it. The payday. He fumbled with the locks and threw the door open. A pathetic, greasy smile plastered on his face. "Oh, man, thank God. You're from her family, right? Look, she's just upset. I can explain everything." Mikhail didn't move. He just looked at Mark. Then he looked with profound disgust at the state of the apartment. "Mr. Jennings," Mikhail said. He was holding a thick manila envelope. "I have 2 items for you." He handed Mark a sheaf of papers. "This is a temporary restraining order. You are to remain 1,000 feet away from Ms. Stavros at all times. Any attempt to contact her, her family, or her associates will result in your immediate arrest." Mark's smile evaporated. "Stavros. What is this, a restraining order? That's insane. I love her." Mikhail ignored him. "Second," he said, holding up the thick manila envelope. "Is this?" Mark's eyes lit up again. "The money." Okay, look, a joke's a joke. That's the cash, right? For my silence, I get it. I'm cool. I won't say anything. "This," Mikhail continued, "is a file compiled by our security team. It contains transcripts of your conversations with Mr. Anthony Bellucci. It contains time-stamped photographs of you meeting him at the Pig and Whistle Bar on 48th Street. It contains copies of your text messages agreeing to provide candid photos of Ms. Stavros in exchange for $10,000. And it contains a sworn affidavit from Mr. Bellucci, who is now in federal custody, stating that you agreed to help him confirm Ms. Stavros's identity for his client, who he knew intended to kidnap her." The color drained from Mark's face. He was white as bleached bone. "I didn't know. I thought he was a producer. It was for my art." "You," Mikhail said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, "are a special kind of stupid. You tried to sell a woman for $50,000 and you didn't even get the money." "Please." Mark was whimpering now, tears of pure self-pity streaming down his face. "Please, I'm broke. She has to help me. The severance. The $10,000. That was the deal, right, please?" Mikhail looked at the envelope in his hand. He pulled from it a single cashier's check. Mark's eyes locked onto it. A starving dog high on hope. It was made out to Mark Jennings. The amount $10,000. "This," Mikhail said. Yes, please. I'll do anything. I'll disappear, I swear." "Ms. Stavros wanted me to give you a message." Mikhail held the check up in front of Mark's desperate eyes, and with 2 hands he ripped it in half. "P." He ripped it again, and again, and again until it was just a cloud of confetti. He opened his hand and let the pieces flutter down onto the bourbon-stained floor. Mark let out a sound, a high-pitched wounded animal keen. The message, Mikhail said, dusting off his hands, is no. She knows what you did. Mr. Bellucci is gone. His client is gone. The money is gone. You are nothing. Mikhail placed the thick manila envelope of evidence on the table on top of the eviction notice. This is your copy, he said. We have the original. If you ever say the name Clara Stavros again, if you ever think about her again, if you so much as post a broken heart song about a mystery girl on YouTube, this file goes to the NYPD. Conspiracy to commit kidnapping carries a 25-year sentence. You will take this loss, you will be evicted, and you will disappear. You are a footnote. Do you understand? Mark had collapsed onto the floor, a sobbing, greasy heap amidst the confetti of his lost fortune. He was rocking back and forth, muttering, I didn't know. Mikhail looked at him for one more second. Yes, you did, he said. He turned, walked out of the apartment, and pulled the door shut, leaving Mark Jennings alone with the ruins of his life. While Mark Jennings was having his world dismantled, Clara Stavros was staring at a different kind of disaster. The encrypted laptop was open, projecting a holographic display onto the far wall of the penthouse. It wasn't showing movies or stock tickers. It was a live three-dimensional model of the Stavros global shipping fleet. Red, yellow, and green lights pulsed across the globe. There was far too much red. He was leveraged to the hilt, Julian said, sipping a small dark espresso. He had conjured it from a machine that was seamlessly built into a marble wall. Darius was a gambler. He thought the company was his personal piggy bank. He was shorting his own stock using company assets as collateral for disastrous side ventures in crypto and rare earth mineral speculation. He was trying to bleed it dry, Clara said, her eyes scanning the data. He was selling off our prime assets, the Rotterdam deepwater port, the entire LNG tanker fleet, to shell corporations. His own shell corporations, yes, Julian confirmed. He was siphoning the cash to private accounts in the Caymans and Liechtenstein. He knew, I suspect, that his time was limited. He was trying to extract as much value as possible before the authorities, or frankly, we caught up. He was a cornered rat chewing through the wires. Clara navigated to another file. A list of the Stavros Global Board of Directors. A row of old stern faces stared back at her. And them the board. They just let him. Some were complicit. Old money allies of his mother's family. They're being removed. Most, Julian said with a sigh, were simply asleep. Your father. Constantine was a titan. He didn't build a team. He built a cult of personality. He was the sun, and they were just small planets orbiting him. When he died and Darius, the rightful male heir, stepped in, they just kept orbiting. They were content to collect their board fees and look the other way as long as the dividends kept coming. But the dividends stopped, Clara said, pointing to a graph that showed a 90% drop in shareholder value over 18 months. By then it was too late. Darius had them. He'd implicated them in his early smaller frauds. They were trapped. Clara finally sat down, the wool silk of her suit hissing against the leather of the chair. She felt a profound weariness. Not the physical exhaustion of the diner, but a deep psychic exhaustion. She had escaped one parasite only to find he was just a single cell on a much larger diseased organism. She had spent 2 years hiding from a monster only to be handed his crown and his $40 billion in debt and decay. What? She asked, her voice quiet. Was it all for? He's gone. Darius is in prison. But he won. He destroyed my father's legacy. Not yet, Julian said. He walked over to a bookshelf, the only one in the room, and ran his hand along the spines. He pulled out one book. It was not a rare first edition. It was a simple leather-bound journal, its corners worn. He placed it on the table in front of her. Your father was a titan, yes, but he wasn't a fool. He knew Darius. He knew his appetites. And I believe he had a suspicion about his own accident long before it happened. Clara's head snapped up. He was getting careful. In his last year, Julian said, he created this penthouse as a panic room under my name. He moved assets into trusts that Darius could never ever touch, trusts that became active only upon two conditions: his death and my biometric confirmation that you were safe. Clara's hand trembled just slightly as she reached for the journal. He called it the Odyssey Protocol, Julian said. A way to get you home should you ever be lost at sea. He left this for you. He told me to give it to you on the day you were ready to come home. Clara opened the cover. The first page was her father's handwriting. Bold, sharp, and impatient, halfway between Greek and English. My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, I have failed you. My life has been forfeit. I am sorry. I am sorry I put this burden on you. I am sorry I could not protect you from my first greatest mistake, Darius. But my sorrow ends there. I am not sorry for the legacy I built. It is strong. But a company is not just steel and numbers, my daughter. It is a living thing, and it can be poisoned. Darius is a poison. By the time you read this, Julian will have cleaned the wound. But the poison will still be in the bloodstream. The board, the banks, the partners, they will all be infected with his fear, his greed, or his incompetence. You are the only antidote. Clara's vision blurred. It was the first time she had come close to tears all day. They will not respect you. They will see a girl. They will see a victim. They will see a grieving daughter to be managed. You must not under any circumstances allow this. You are not a girl. You are a Stavros. And a Stavros does not grieve. A Stavros builds. In this journal you will find not my secrets. You will find my weapons, the private ledgers, the favors owed to me by every politician, banker, and rival from Athens to Hong Kong, the back doors to every account, the kill switch codes for the complicit board members. Do not be the daughter. Be the Titan. Do not mourn me. Avenge me. And you avenge me not by destroying Darius. I trust Julian has handled that, but by saving my company. By saving your company. Your loving and very proud father. Clara closed the journal. She took a deep, shuddering breath. The scent of old leather and her father's ink filled her lungs. She set the book down and looked at Julian. The hardness in her eyes was back, but it was different. It wasn't the cold, brittle anger of a victim. It was the forged, focused heat of a weapon. A temporary base of operations, you said? Yes, Julian replied. Wrong, Clara said, standing up. It's a war room, and we've been on the defensive for 2 years. It's time to attack. She looked at the laptop, at the map of her broken empire. Julian, get me a full breakdown of the board's personal portfolios. I want to know where every single one of them is vulnerable. And get me a list of the top 3 M&A mergers and acquisitions firms in New York. I want the best, the most ruthless. What are you planning, Clara? Darius was selling off the fleet good. He saved me the trouble. Clara said, her mind moving with terrifying speed. He thought he was selling to his own shell companies, but you said he was leveraged to the hilt, which means banks own those shell companies now. And banks don't want ships. They want cash. She smiled. It was her father's smile, all teeth. We're going to buy them back. For pennies on the dollar. We're going to use my father's secret trusts, the money I now control, to buy back our own assets from the very banks that funded my brother's treachery. We're not just saving Stavros Global, Julian. We're going to gut it, clean it, and relaunch it. Julian looked at her. The hawk-like eyes were for the first time filled with something like genuine pride. That is a very, very big move. It's the only move, Clara said. My father was right. It's time to stop being a ghost. It's time to be a titan. 3 weeks later. The main boardroom of Stavros Global, located on the 60th floor of a glass and steel tower in the financial district, was a tomb. It was paneled in dark, heavy mahogany, and a 50-foot table stretched down its center. It was a room built for intimidation, designed by men in the 1980s, who believed power was synonymous with weight and shadow. Seated around the table were the 12 remaining members of the board of directors. They were without exception men. They were all over the age of 65. They were a Mount Rushmore of old money entitlement and quiet panic. They were whispering amongst themselves, their expensive, silk-suited shoulders hunched. Darius is in a federal prison. The stock is delisted. The banks have called in all the loans. We're insolvent. And who is this girl? Who called the meeting? Constantine's daughter, the one who disappeared. Rumor is she was in a mental institution for 2 years, a complete basket case. Julian Thorne is with her. This is a power play. He can't play with an empty hand. We're bankrupt. It's over. The heavy oak doors at the end of the room swung open. Julian Thorne walked in first. He looked as always severe and impeccable. He took a position against the wall, not at the table. He was an observer. Then Clara Stavros walked in. The board fell silent. They had been expecting the basket case. They had been expecting a tearful, pale girl in a black morning dress. They were not prepared for the woman who stood before them. She was wearing a custom-tailored razor-sharp suit by Acris in a pale, sterile gray that was almost white. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe tight chignon that emphasized her high cheekbones and her father's jawline. Her red lipstick was the only color on her. She carried nothing but a single thin tablet. She walked to the head of the table, her father's chair, and stood there, her hands resting on its back. She didn't sit. She just looked at them, her eyes moving slowly from one terrified, skeptical face to the next. The silence stretched. It was her silence now, not the apartment's. It was the silence of absolute power. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said. Her voice was cool, clear, and amplified by the room's acoustics. A man at the other end, Arthur Pennington, the board's interim chair, cleared his throat. "Ms. Stavros, Clara, on behalf of the board, we want to offer our deepest, most profound condolences for the loss of your father, and for your own ordeal. We are relieved to see you well." "Are you Arthur?" she replied. Her eyes were locked on him. "Are you relieved?" Pennington, a man who had stared down hostile takeovers, visibly flinched. "Because I'm not," Claire continued, walking slowly along the side of the table. "I am not relieved. I am appalled. Now see here, young lady." Another board member, a man named Harleston, began. "You will not call me young lady." Clara snapped, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. "You will not call me Clara. You will refer to me as Ms. Stavros, or Madam Chair. I am, as of 900 a.m. this morning, the majority shareholder of this company." A bomb had gone off. The men sputtered. "But that's impossible. Darius's shares are frozen. The company is insolvent." Clara tapped her tablet. The massive screen at the end of the room lit up. It was a wire transfer confirmation. A single transfer. For $5.4 billion. "Stavros Global was, as you correctly noted, bankrupt," Clara said calmly. "The company's debts, collateralized by Darius, were called in by a consortium of banks. Those banks, as of yesterday, foreclosed on our primary assets, our entire tanker fleet, our port leases, in this building. As it happens," she said, a tiny cold smile playing on her lips, "I have recently come into an inheritance. A private trust established by my father that my half-brother knew nothing about. This morning I formed a new holding company, and that holding company purchased all of Stavros Global's toxic debt from the banks for 30 cents on the dollar." She let that sink in. "I," she said, "am now your sole creditor. I own your debt, which means I own you." She looked at Arthur Pennington. "Arthur, your personal holding company, Pennington Ventures, was co-signatory on 2 of Darius's most fraudulent loans. You are personally liable for $300 million. I expect you to be ruined by nightfall." She turned to Harleston. "Mr. Harleston, your family's shipping line has been renting our dry docks in Singapore at a 90% discount for 18 months courtesy of Darius. That's a gift I'd value at $80 million. I believe the SEC will be very interested in that. Unless," she returned to the head of the table, "unless You all tender your resignations, effective immediately." The room was stone-cold silent. "You can't," Pennington whispered. "This is our company. This was my father's company." Clara countered, her voice low and dangerous. "And you let his degenerate son, a murderer and a thief, gut it like a fish while you held its fins. You stood by. You were complicit. You were cowards. You were weak." She looked back at Pennington. "You thought I was a basket case. You thought I was a grieving girl. Gentlemen, for 2 years I lived in a one-room apartment in Hell's Kitchen. I served beer to pigs. I lived with a man who just last week tried to sell me to my brother's assassins for $50,000. Their blood ran cold." This was not a story they had read in the Wall Street Journal. "Do you understand," she said, leaning forward, "that after that you do not scare me? This room does not scare me. Your titles, your old money, and your disappointment mean absolutely nothing. You are the past, an infection, and I am the cure." She tapped her tablet again. "Your resignation letters are pre-written. They are on the tablets in front of you. You will sign them. You will vacate this building in 1 hour. If you do not, Mr. Thorne will be releasing my father's personal files on each of you, the Odyssey Protocol, to the U.S. Attorney's Office. I believe you all know what's in them." One by one, with trembling hands, the men picked up their styluses. The kill switch codes her father had called them. Within 5 minutes it was done. The entire board was dissolved. "Thank you, gentlemen," Clara said. "Security will see you out." They filed out of the room, broken old men avoiding her gaze. Julian Thorne remained by the wall, watching. Clara Stavros finally sat down in her father's chair. It fit her perfectly. She looked at Julian. "Get the M&A team from KKR on the line, and tell the press I'll be making a statement at 4 p.m. Stavros Global isn't just under new management, it's being reborn." Julian nodded, a rare, genuine smile on his face. "And what of the Penthouse, Ms. Stavros?" Clara looked out the window at the New York skyline. The Penthouse, the glass tower, seemed like a distant memory, a stepping stone. "Sell it," she said. "I'm moving on to the Eclipse." The Eclipse was her father's 500-foot private yacht, a vessel that was in itself a mobile corporate headquarters. And Julian, "Yes, Madam Chair. Find Mr. Petrov, the landlord, at my old apartment in Hell's Kitchen. Buy his building. Forgive the debt of all his tenants. All of them, except 4B. I want that eviction notice served, immediately." Clara turned back to her screen. She left Mark without complaints because her problems were and always had been so much bigger than him. He wasn't even a footnote. The story was never about her walking into a penthouse with a billionaire. It was about her walking out of her old life to become the billionaire. The power, the throne. And she had just taken her seat. Clara's story proves that the quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous. She didn't fight her small battles because she was preparing for an all-out war. She stepped from the gutter to the throne, but her fight is just beginning. What do you think her first move should be as the new chairwoman of Stavros Global? Do you think Mark got what he deserved? If this story of silence, betrayal, and ultimate revenge gripped you, please hit that like button. It truly helps the channel. Share this video with someone who loves a story about a powerful comeback. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a single story of power drama and the world that happens behind closed doors. We have new stories coming every week. Thanks for listening.
"Look at you! You're trash, Rosalind! You belong on the floor with the dirt!" He treated her like a servant in her own home. He poured filthy mop water on his wife in front of his mistress, laughing at her misery. But Axton Lowe made one fatal miscalculation. He didn't know the woman scrubbing his floors was the mysterious CEO holding the pen to his company's $10 billion lifeline. She wasn't cleaning up a mess. She was cleaning house. The water in the bucket was gray, a swirling mixture of floor cleaner and the accumulated grime of the Lowe family mansion. It smelled of harsh lemons and humiliation. Rosalind Gray dipped the rag in, her hands red and raw, the water stinging a fresh paper cut on her thumb. Missed a spot, a voice sneered from above. Rosalind didn't look up. She knew that voice better than her own heartbeat. It was Haven Price, the woman who wore Rosalind's diamonds, sat at Rosalind's dining table, and slept in Rosalind's husband's bed. I said, Haven repeated, tapping her stiletto heel against Rosalind's shoulder. You missed a spot. Right there. By Axton's chair. Rosalind squeezed the rag, the dirty water trickling down her wrist. I'll get it, Haven. Please, just let me finish. The dining room was expansive, lit by a crystal chandelier that cost more than the house Rosalind grew up in. Tonight, Axton Lowe was hosting the board members of Lowe Tech. The stakes were astronomical. The company was bleeding money, desperate for the Project Helios contract, a government renewable energy initiative worth $10 billion. They needed to impress the investors. And Axton had decided that having his wife serve as the help was the ultimate power move. The double doors swung open. Axton Lowe strode in, wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way, with eyes that could charm a snake or crush a soul. Beside him was his mother, Opal Vaughn, a matriarch with hair like spun steel and a heart to match. Why is she still here? Opal hissed, looking down at Rosalind with unmasked disgust. The guests will be arriving in 20 minutes, Axton. I told you to crate the dog. She's finishing the floors, Mother, Axton said, pouring himself a scotch. He walked over to where Rosalind was kneeling. He didn't crouch down. He loomed. Rosalind, look at me. Rosalind slowly lifted her head. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, her face devoid of makeup, wearing a shapeless gray dress that Opal had bought for her from a thrift store bin. Yes, Axton? Travis Ward is coming tonight, Axton said, swirling his drink. You know Travis, my lawyer. He's bringing the papers. Finally. Rosalind felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. The divorce papers? The freedom papers, Haven giggled, draping herself over Axton's arm. Once Axton lands Project Helios, he'll be the richest man in the city. He can't have a mouse like you dragging down his image. I helped you build this company, Rosalind whispered, her voice trembling. When we started, in the garage, I did the coding. I did the accounts. Axton laughed. It was a dry, barking sound. You typed what I told you to type. You're a secretary, Rosalind, a glorified admin who got lucky enough to marry a visionary. But your luck just ran out. The doorbell rang. A deep, resonating chime. Get up, Opal commanded. Get to the kitchen. Stay out of sight. Rosalind moved to stand, grabbing the handle of the heavy mop bucket. But as she rose, Haven accidentally stuck out her foot. Rosalind stumbled. The heavy plastic bucket tipped. Splash. Gallons of cold, gray, filthy water cascaded across the polished marble floor, and all over Axton's Italian leather shoes and tuxedo trousers. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb falling before the explosion. You stupid bitch, Axton whispered. I'm sorry. Rosalind dropped to her knees, frantically trying to scoop the water back with the rag. I tripped. I'm so sorry, Axton. Sorry? Axton's face turned a violent shade of red. He kicked the bucket away, sending it skittering into the wall. He reached down, grabbed the remaining water in the bottom of the bucket, and in one fluid, cruel motion, dumped the sludge over Rosalind's head. The cold, gritty water soaked her hair, blinded her eyes, and dripped down her neck. She gasped, wiping grime from her lips. Now you match your worth, Axton spat, wiping his shoes on the dry part of her dress. You're dirty, Rosalind. You've always been dirty. Get out of my sight. If I see you before the guests leave, I will throw you out on the street without a penny. Haven and Opal were laughing. It was a cruel, high-pitched sound that echoed off the marble walls. Rosalind didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply nodded, water dripping from her nose. "Yes, Axton," she said softly. "I'll go." She stood up, her posture strangely erect, despite the filth covering her. She turned and walked toward the servants' entrance. As she pushed through the swinging door, she heard Axton say, "Don't worry about the Helios deal, Mother. The investor is a ghost. No one knows who the Phantom is, but Travis says we have it in the bag." Rosalind paused for a microsecond, her hand on the doorframe. A shadow passed over her face, not of sadness, but of something much darker. If only you knew Axton, she thought. If only you knew who the Phantom was. The moment the servant's door clicked shut, the trembling stopped. Rosalind Gray did not go to the small cot in the laundry room where she had been forced to sleep for the last 6 months. She walked straight out the back door of the mansion, into the cool night air. The heavy scent of jasmine from the garden mixed with the chemical smell of the floor cleaner soaking her clothes. She walked past the 6-car garage where Axton kept his Ferraris and Lamborghinis. She walked to the edge of the estate, to the high stone wall that separated the low mansion from the rest of the world. She reached into the wet pocket of her dress and pulled out a burner phone. It was a cheap, plastic device, the only piece of technology Axton allowed her to have, thinking she used it only to call the grocery store. She dialed a number. 1 ring, 2 rings. "Status?" a deep voice answered. "Pick me up," Rosalind said. Her voice was no longer the whisper of a frightened mouse. It was low, smooth, and commanded absolute authority. "The South Gate, now." "Roger that, ma'am. ETA 2 minutes." Rosalind waited in the shadows. 2 minutes later, a matte black sedan with tinted windows rolled silently to the curb. It wasn't a flashy sports car. It was an armored transport, the kind used by heads of state. The driver, a mountain of a man named Kyle, stepped out and opened the rear door. He didn't blink at her appearance, the dripping hair, or the smell of bleach. "To the Penthouse, Mrs. Lowe?" Kyle asked. "No," Rosalind said, sliding onto the cream leather seat. "To the Intercontinental. And Cale, call me Miss Gray. Mrs. Lowe died about 10 minutes ago." As the car pulled away, Rosalind pressed a button on the armrest. A hidden compartment opened, revealing a towel, a bottle of sparkling water, and a tablet. She dried her face roughly, wiping away the grime of her past life. Then, she picked up the tablet. The screen illuminated her face. It displayed the financial schematics of Project Helios. The project was a massive global initiative to overhaul the energy grid of North America. $10 billion in initial funding. Every tech giant in the world was fighting for it. Low Tech, Axton's company, was the frontrunner publicly, but the final decision lay with the private equity firm Chimera, headed by a reclusive CEO known only as the Phantom. Rosalind tapped the screen. A video call connected instantly. A man with silver fox hair and sharp, rimless glasses appeared. This was Micah Hunt, the public face of Chimera and Rosalind's trusted proxy. "Rosalind?" Micah's eyes widened slightly. "You look wet." "Domestic hazard," she said dryly. "What's the status on the bid?" "Travis Ward submitted Low Tech's final proposal an hour ago," Micah reported. "It's aggressive. Axton is leveraging everything. He's put up the mansion, the company patents, and even his personal offshore accounts as collateral to prove liquidity. He's convinced the deal is his." "He is desperate," Rosalind mused. "He needs the money to cover the debts he racked up gambling in Macau last month. Does he know who he's pitching to?" "No one knows," Micah smiled. "To the world, the Phantom is a myth. To Axton Lowe, the Phantom is just a signature he needs. He has no idea he's been pitching to the wife he treats like garbage." Rosalind looked out the window as the city lights blurred by. "Travis Ward? Is he loyal?" Travis is a shark, Micah said. He smells blood in the water. He's been feeding Axton false confidence, just as you instructed. But Rosalind, are you sure? If you deny this bid, Low Tech collapses. Axton will be ruined. Opal will be homeless. Rosalind closed her eyes. She remembered the cold water hitting her face. She remembered the years of emotional battering, the isolation, the way Axton had systematically stripped her of her confidence until she believed she was nothing. She remembered how he stole her code, her algorithms, and claimed them as his own to build his empire. "Micah," Rosalind said, opening her eyes. They were hard as diamonds. "I don't just want to deny the bid. I want to acquire the assets when they default. Set up a meeting, tomorrow morning, the Mandarin Oriental Suite." "For who?" "For Axton Lowe," Rosalind said. "Tell him the Phantom is finally ready to meet him face to face to sign the deal." "And you're going to show up?" Micah asked, a hint of concern in his voice. "Oh, I'll be there," Rosalind said. "But first I need a shower and a tailor. Get me the Yves Saint Laurent team. I have a meeting to dress for." The morning sun hit the glass walls of the low-tech boardroom, blinding in its intensity. Axton Lowe paced the length of the mahogany table, vibrating with nervous energy. He looked impeccable in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, but his eyes were bloodshot. He hadn't slept. "Sit down, Axton. You're making me dizzy," Opal Vaughn snapped from the head of the table. She was reading a financial report, her lips pursed in a thin line. "Are we sure about this meeting?" "It's confirmed, Mother," Axton said, spinning around. "Micah Hunt called me personally at 2:00 a.m. The Phantom is in town. He wants to sign today." "Today." Travis Ward sat calmly at the side, checking his watch. He was a man who played both sides of the fence, but he knew which side had the electric current running through it. "The contract is standard, Axton, but the collateral clause is heavy. If you fail to deliver the prototype within 3 months, Chimera takes majority control of Low Tech." "We won't fail," Axton scoffed. "I have the best engineers in the country." "You fired your lead engineer last week because he looked at you wrong," Travis reminded him gently. "He was incompetent." Axton slammed his hand on the table. "Like everyone else in this miserable city, except me. I am the visionary here." Haven Price sashayed into the room, carrying a tray of espressos. She was wearing a white dress that looked suspiciously like a bridal gown cut to cocktail length. "Coffee, darling? You need to be sharp for your $10 billion. Axton grabbed a cup, spilling a little on the saucer. "Did you check on Rosalind?" Haven rolled her eyes. "I checked the laundry room this morning. She's gone. Probably ran off to her mother's trailer park to cry. Good riddance. The house smells better already." "She better not have stolen anything," Opal muttered. "I counted the silver, but you can never trust people of her background." "Forget her," Axton said, waving his hand as if swatting a fly. "Once I sign this deal, I'll be a billionaire 10 times over. I'll divorce her for abandonment, give her nothing, and we can finally be the power couple of the century, Haven." Haven beamed and kissed his cheek. "The Apex Gala is tonight, Axton. Imagine walking in there announcing the deal. We'll be royalty." Axton checked his reflection in the glass window. He adjusted his tie. He saw a king. He didn't see the guillotine hanging directly above his neck. "Travis," Axton said. "Who is this Phantom? Seriously, give me something. Is he old, young, American?" Travis Ward looked down at his papers to hide the smirk forming on his lips. "Rumor has it, the Phantom is someone who values loyalty above all else, someone who builds empires from the ashes." "Sounds like me," Axton grinned. "We need to leave," Opal said, standing up. "The meeting is at the Mandarin Oriental. We cannot be late." The presidential suite at the Mandarin Oriental was larger than most houses. It was decorated in minimalist gold and white. Axton, Opal, Haven, and Travis sat on one side of the massive glass conference table. Opposite them sat Micah Hunt, calm and composed. "Mr. Hunt," Axton said, his leg bouncing under the table. "It is an honor. But where is he? Where is the Phantom?" "The principal is finishing up a call," Micah said smoothly. "They will be with you momentarily. Please, review the final terms." Axton barely glanced at the papers. He just wanted the money. He wanted the power. He wanted to go back home and burn everything Rosalind had ever touched. "Everything looks in order," Axton said, clicking his gold pen. "I'm ready to sign." "The principal insists on a face-to-face confirmation of the collateral assets," Micah said. Fine, Axton said impatiently. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the end of the room opened. The sound of heels clicking on the marble floor echoed, sharp, rhythmic, deliberate. Axton turned, a charming smile plastered on his face, ready to greet an old male billionaire. A woman walked in. She was wearing a tailored white suit that screamed power. Her hair was blown out in sleek, honey-colored waves. She wore sunglasses, and her lips were painted a dangerous shade of crimson. Around her neck sat a diamond choker that was worth more than Low Tech's entire Q3 earnings. She walked with a predator's grace. The air in the room seemed to be sucked toward her. "Sorry to keep you waiting, gentlemen," the woman said. Her voice was familiar, terrifyingly familiar. Axton dropped his pen. Opal's mouth fell open. Haven choked on her water. The woman reached up and slowly removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were cold, clear, and utterly unforgiving. "Rosalind?" Axton whispered, his voice cracking. Rosalind Gray didn't smile. She walked to the head of the table, the seat reserved for the Phantom, and sat down. She interlaced her fingers and looked at her husband. "Hello, Axton," she said coolly. "I believe you have some dirty water on your shoes. You might want to clean that up before we discuss my $10 billion. The air in the presidential suite was thick with disbelief, fear, and the metallic tang of crushed ego. Axton Lowe, usually a man of booming confidence, was a statue of horror, his face the color of bleached linen. "Rosalind," he finally managed, the name emerging as a choked rasp. "What in God's name is this joke? Put the glasses back on. This isn't funny." Rosalind, now Ms. Gray, leaned back in the Italian leather chair, the white suit a stark, powerful contrast to the shapeless gray dress she wore yesterday. The diamonds at her throat caught the light, refracting her terrifying calm. Micah Hunt, sitting beside her, slid a clean white tablet across the table to Axton. "Mr. Lowe, there is no joke. Allow me to formally introduce the principal of Chimera Global Capital, the firm that controls 52% of the global renewable energy infrastructure, and the final decision-maker for Project Helios. This is Ms. Rosalind Gray." Opal Vaughn was the first to regain her venom. "Rosalind Gray? Chimera? Don't be ridiculous, Axton. She was scrubbing floors 24 hours ago. She has no capacity for this. She's barely literate. You never let her finish her degree." Rosalind's gaze, steady and lethal, locked onto her former mother-in-law. "It's true, Opal. I didn't finish my degree. I couldn't. Not after Axton convinced me that the best thing I could do was manage his schedule and handle his trivial accounts. But I did finish something else." She nodded to Micah. Micah tapped his own tablet, and a complex organizational chart exploded onto the massive wall screen behind them. At the pinnacle, the name Chimera Global Capital glowed. Directly below it, one name dominated: Rosalind Gray, Chief Executive Officer. Chimera Global Capital was established 7 years ago, Rosalind narrated, her voice smooth and devoid of inflection, like a surgeon detailing an operation. Its core seed funding came from the development and monetization of proprietary financial trading algorithms. Algorithms, Axton, that allowed Chimera to forecast and capitalize on emerging market trends, particularly in clean energy. Axton stumbled back, knocking his expensive chair over. Algorithms? That's impossible. I invented the algorithms. I built low-tech from the ground up. You just answered the phone. Rosalind's lips curled into a mirthless smile. Did I, Axton? Do you remember the Project Chrysalis's codebase? The one that predicted the solar commodity boom 3 years before it happened? The one you showed me only once, claiming it was too complex for my little mind to grasp? Axton's denial was immediate and desperate. Lies! Slander! Travis, get her out of here! This is intimidation! Every eye in the room turned to Travis Ward, Axton's loyal legal counsel. Travis slowly took off his gold-rimmed glasses, folded them, and placed them neatly on the table. He stood up, but instead of moving to Axton's side, he walked around the table and stood behind Rosalind, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Axton," Travis said, his voice calm, betraying no emotion. "My client is Ms. Gray. I have been representing Chimera Global Capital, and more specifically, Ms. Gray, for the past 4 years. I assure you everything she states is accurate, and this meeting is entirely legal." The second betrayal hit Axton like a physical blow. He staggered. Haven Price, who had been hiding behind Axton's chair, finally found her voice, shrill and panicked. "You snake! You traitor, Travis! You were supposed to protect Axton. We were getting married next month." "Ms. Price," Travis interjected coolly, "I believe you were merely hoping to marry into the wealth my actual client created. Furthermore, I advise you to stay silent. You are a civilian here." Rosalind watched the drama unfold with detached interest. She let Axton sink into the chair Micah had righted. "Let's get back to the deal, Axton," Rosalind continued, picking up the pen he had dropped. "The Project Helios contract. You were so convinced you had it. You collateralized everything, didn't you? The mansion, the patents, the company, and those offshore accounts. But here is the truth you missed while you were busy insulting your wife." She pushed a new document across the table. It was titled, "Decline and Acquisition Offer." "I am not signing your $10 billion lifeline, Axton. Chimera Global declines the low-tech bid. But since you have offered up every asset you possess to prove your supposed liquidity, I am offering you an alternative." She tapped the signature line on the new contract. "Sign this. It is a full, non-hostile acquisition of low-tech. We absorb your debts, keep the company solvent, and give you a severance package large enough to buy a modest condo. It's the only way you walk away with anything." "I won't sign!" Axton roared, finally finding his footing. "You think you can humiliate me? I'll sue you. I'll take this public." Rosalind's gaze hardened. "You'll take what public, Axton? That you couldn't tell the difference between a cleaning rag and a financial titan? That you used stolen intellectual property as collateral for debt you incurred in Macau? I have the receipts, Axton. Every debt, every gambling loss, every fraudulent claim, and the original time-stamped code of Project Chrysalis, filed under my maiden name, Rosalind Gray, 6 months before we even met." She leaned forward, her elbows on the table, the air crackling with her raw power. "You have 30 seconds to sign, Axton, or I initiate legal proceedings for IP theft, fraud, and default on collateral. You lose the company, the house, the accounts, and you face prison time. Your choice." The clock started ticking in the silence, each second a hammer blow against Axton's dissolving reality. Opal was slumped, pale and defeated. Haven was silently weeping, realizing her fantasy of wealth had just evaporated. Axton Lowe stared at the acquisition contract. The ink seemed to swim, mocking him with the permanence of his failure. 30 seconds became 5. "Sign it, Axton," Travis Ward urged, his voice sharp. "It's the only mercy you're going to get." With a shaky hand, Axton grabbed the pen. He didn't read it. He knew he was signing away his life. He scrawled his name with a furious, ugly energy, then pushed the document back as if it were contaminated. Rosalind picked up the document, examined the signature, and smiled. A genuine smile, the first Axton had seen in years, and it was terrifying. "Welcome to Chimera Global, Axton. You'll be assigned a junior consultant role, effective immediately, with a 3-month probation period. You answer to Micah Hunt." Micah offered a small, polite nod. Axton looked like he might explode. "You planned this," Opal whispered, staring at Rosalind. "All those years, the meekness, the silence. It was all a lie." "No, Opal," Rosalind corrected gently. "The meekness was real. The silence was survival. But the planning? That was self-defense." Rosalind stood and walked to the panoramic window, looking out over the glittering cityscape, a skyline that she, the Phantom, now subtly influenced. She began to speak, not to them, but to the memory of the woman she used to be. "When Axton brought me into low tech, he told me my original code, Chrysalis, was cute, but needed his vision to be great. When the company took off, he started erasing me. He took the credit, then he took my voice, then he took my identity. He started hiding my financials, limiting my access, convincing me I was incompetent." She turned back, her eyes blazing with newfound freedom. "But Axton made one mistake. He was too arrogant to believe I could be a threat. He thought the only way I could communicate was through the shared bank account he monitored." Flashback, 3 years ago. The memory unfolded. Rosalind, sitting alone in the low-tech server room late one night, a place Axton never bothered with. She was wearing one of her dowdy cleaning shirts. She was installing a complex, custom-built quantum key encryption module onto the mainframe. It was a digital ghost door. She had spent 6 months learning advanced encryption and decentralized finance, using public library computers and paying for online courses with money she earned secretly selling her old code scraps online under a pseudonym. "Chimera Global," she whispered, typing the name onto a screen. "A new skin for the butterfly." The next night, she met Travis Ward in a cramped, anonymous bar downtown. Travis was Axton's sharpest lawyer, but he was also a man who appreciated real intelligence, and he had seen the way Axton treated his wife. "I need a proxy," Rosalind told Travis, pushing a flash drive across the sticky table. "I need an investment firm built from scratch, completely untraceable to Rosalind Lowe. I will feed you the algorithms. You make the trades. When Axton is on the brink of losing everything, you step in as the legal counsel for my firm, Chimera, and offer the one thing he desperately needs." Travis, who had analyzed the code on the drive, looked stunned. This is genius, Rosalind. Why are you staying in that house?" "Because if I leave now, it's a divorce and a messy public battle," she said, her voice hollow. "If I stay, I become a shadow. I control his exposure. I learn every weakness, every debt, every secret he has. I let him build his kingdom on a foundation of sand, while I build my empire on solid granite." That night, Travis introduced her to Micah Hunt, a brilliant but disillusioned former investment banker who had burned out on Wall Street. Micah became the voice, the face, and the public shield of the Phantom. Rosalind, the silent wife, funded Chimera from the laundry room. Axton, the loud visionary, unknowingly laid the traps for his own ruin. "And Travis," Rosalind finished, looking at her lawyer with gratitude. "He was invaluable. He didn't betray Axton. Axton betrayed him first by treating him like a disposable clerk. Travis simply saw the more powerful current and navigated toward it." Travis smiled faintly. "Loyalty is earned, Axton, not bought." Axton's face was a mask of cold fury. "You used me. You built your empire under my nose. You were a spy." "I was your wife, Axton," Rosalind said, sadness momentarily touching her expression. "I was loyal, but you confused loyalty with ownership. You spent years convincing me I was nothing, so you shouldn't be surprised when I became everything." Opal stood up, her jaw set. "This is a disgrace. Come, Axton. We have lost the battle, but not the war. We will challenge the acquisition." "I wouldn't advise that, Opal," Micah interjected, holding up a file. "We have provided the documentation detailing Axton's personal gambling debts, using low-tech assets as security, a federal offense. Also, the time-stamped IP filing for the Chrysalis algorithm is undeniable. Any challenge will result in criminal charges. Ms. Gray is being generous." Micah then turned to Haven Price, who was still silently weeping. "As for you, Ms. Price, you are now trespassing on private corporate property. Please gather your belongings and vacate the premises immediately." Haven shrieked, "Axton, do something! He can't talk to me like that!" Axton didn't move. He was staring into the void of his collapsed life. He was a small, ruined man in a perfectly tailored suit. The meeting was over. Axton Lowe had signed. The empire he built on deceit now belonged to the woman he had crushed. Rosalind remained seated at the head of the table, her victory feeling surprisingly hollow. Micah and Travis were calmly packing the documents, their professionalism absolute. Opal and Haven had been escorted out, Opal spitting threats, Haven sobbing dramatically. Axton still sat, hunched over, his hands clutching the edge of the glass table. "Why?" Axton finally muttered, his voice hoarse. "Why didn't you just leave? Why the elaborate game? You could have divorced me years ago, taken half. I wouldn't have cared." Rosalind looked at him, pity mixing with cold justice. "You misunderstood the game, Axton. It was never about money. Chimera has 50 times the valuation of low tech. It was about autonomy and ownership, of myself and of my work." She opened her tablet and pulled up a simple, elegant piece of code. "This is Chrysalis, Axton, the core of low tech. The code I wrote when I was 21, full of hope, believing you were my partner." "It's just code," Axton scoffed, trying one last time to sound superior. "It's cold, heartless." "No, Axton, you are heartless. The code is pure logic," Rosalind said. "But the passion you stole, that's what this was about." She shared a specific memory, one Axton had surely forgotten. "Do you remember the day you pitched the first round of funding? I was sick with the flu, but I stayed up all night to fix a critical bug. I fell asleep at the desk, and you woke me up by pouring cold coffee on my head, telling me to wake up and stop being useless." Axton winced. He vaguely remembered the incident. "That day," Rosalind continued, her voice quiet but devastating, "I realized you didn't just take my code. You took my self-respect. You convinced me I was incapable of brilliance. You made me believe I belonged on the floor, scrubbing dirt." She gestured to the spot where she had been kneeling yesterday. "Yesterday, you proved that you still believed that. You poured dirty water on me in front of your mistress and your mother, the people who mattered to you. You made a statement about my worth." "And I made a statement back," Rosalind concluded, "that the woman you humiliated is the one who owns your life." Axton slammed his fist on the table. "You're just like me, Rosalind. Cruel, vindictive. You got your revenge. Are you happy?" Rosalind looked thoughtful. "No, Axton. I'm not happy. Happiness is built on connection, not conquest. But I am free." She stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. Micah walked over to Axton. "Mr. Lowe, please proceed to the lobby. Security will ensure you receive your personal effects from the office," Micah instructed. Axton stood, his movements slow, his eyes vacant. He looked truly broken. The armor of his arrogance finally shattered. As Axton reached the door, Rosalind stopped him. "Wait." He turned, expecting one last sharp insult. "Axton," Rosalind said, softening her voice only slightly. "The mansion is part of the acquisition. Opal can stay in the guest house for 30 days, but Haven needs to vacate immediately. And Axton, I found the dog. His name is Charlie, not the dog. He's a good boy. He's safe now. Don't worry about him." Axton blinked, processing the unexpected kindness. He said nothing. He simply turned and walked out, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Rosalind took a deep, shuddering breath. The vengeance was complete, yet the residue of pain lingered. "Micah," she said, running a hand over the smooth tabletop. "Book me a flight. I need to visit my sister." "Your sister? The one in Boston? Are you sure, Miss Gray? You have the press conference this afternoon." "I need grounding, Micah," Rosalind said. "The woman Axton stole from was named Rosalind Gray. She had a little sister, Elara, who she promised to always look out for. Now that I'm the Phantom, I need to remember who I was before I became the ghost." She pulled out her phone and scrolled through an old photo album. A picture of two young girls, rosy-cheeked and laughing, flashed on the screen. The elder sister, Rosalind, had her arm around the younger, Elara. Rosalind's eyes welled up for the first time in years, not with the pain of humiliation, but with the quiet promise of a future built on genuine connection and authenticity. The final chapter of her silent empire was not just about acquiring assets. It was about reclaiming her heart. The flight to Boston was intentionally jarring. Rosalind Gray, the woman who had just commanded an $11 billion corporate takeover, chose to fly commercial, settling into a window seat on a crowded late-afternoon jet. She wore dark jeans, a cashmere turtleneck, and a pair of simple wire-rimmed glasses, a deliberate repudiation of the power suit and diamonds she had worn that morning. This was not the Phantom. This was Rosalind, heading home. She had spent the last 7 years, the lifespan of Chimera Global, perfecting the art of compartmentalization. The ruthless CEO lived in the penthouse and the boardroom. The broken wife lived in the mansion's laundry room. She had used Axton's misogyny as a shield, letting him believe her existence was limited to his gilded cage, all while her mind built algorithmic fortresses around the world. But now, the walls were down, and the two halves of her personality were colliding, leaving her feeling dizzyingly displaced. Landing in Boston, the crisp, salt-tinged air felt like a cleansing balm after the stifling, perfume and hubris atmosphere of the coast. She dismissed the Chimera security detail, grabbing a cab and directing it toward the quiet, brownstone-lined streets of Cambridge. Elara Gray, Rosalind's younger sister, lived in a compact apartment above a used bookstore. Elara was everything Rosalind had been forced to suppress: vibrant, unapologetically authentic, and artistic. She was an art restorer, dealing in fragile beauty and subtle repair. Rosalind hadn't seen her in 3 years, communicating only through encrypted text messages and carefully sanitized phone calls whenever Axton was out of the country. The bell above the bookstore chimed as Rosalind stepped inside. The air was heavy with the smell of old paper and dust. "Can I help you find something, ma'am?" Elara called out from behind a tall shelf, her voice warm and melodic. Rosalind didn't answer. She walked down the narrow aisle, her hands brushing against worn leather spines. Elara emerged, holding a tattered copy of Moby Dick. Her eyes, the exact same shade of clear green as Rosalind's, widened into startled pools. "Rosalind!" Elara dropped the book. "Hey, Elara," Rosalind managed, her voice thick with emotion. The distance of years, the lie of her marriage, the trauma of the morning, it all collapsed in the presence of her only family. Elara didn't hesitate. She threw herself across the intervening space, wrapping Rosalind in a tight, fierce hug. "You're here! Oh my God, you're here! I thought you'd never come!" Pulling back, Elara held her sister at arm's length, scanning her face. "You look incredible, but you also look like you haven't slept in a week." Rosalind offered a watery laugh. "It's been a big day. Can we go upstairs?" Upstairs, the apartment was a sanctuary, cluttered, cozy, and filled with the scent of oil paints and lavender. As Alara brewed tea, Rosalind recounted the last 24 hours. The dirty water, the walk to the gate, the white suit, and the utter, soul-shattering look on Axton Lowe's face when she signed her name as his new owner. Alara listened in stunned silence, sitting opposite her sister on a worn velvet armchair. $10 billion. You are the Phantom, Alara breathed, shaking her head. The whole world has been guessing who the Phantom is for 4 years. They thought it was some Saudi prince or an anonymous German fund. It was just me, Rosalind said quietly, sipping the hot, strong tea. A woman sitting in a laundry room with a burner phone and a very good firewall. Why, Rosalind? Why stay there for so long? Rosalind looked out the window at the distant glow of the Boston skyline. Axton was a master thief. He didn't just steal my code, he stole the concept of my competence. If I had left early, he would have dragged me through the mud, discredited me, and tied up my original IP in court for a decade. I needed a clean break. I needed him to be so comfortable in his illusion of power that he wouldn't see the guillotine until it dropped. She looked down at her hands, the hands that had been raw from cleaning floors just hours ago. And honestly, Alara, part of me believed the narrative. He was so good at telling me I was worthless that sometimes I needed to clean floors just to remind myself who I was supposed to be. But you're not worthless, Alara insisted, taking her sister's hand. You're the smartest person I know. You were the one who taught me to fix broken things, to look past the surface damage. You didn't need the revenge, Rosalind. You just needed the permission to be yourself again. The revenge was necessary to gain the autonomy, Rosalind corrected, a hard edge in her voice. The autonomy is necessary for the next step, the authenticity. That's why I'm here. I need to remember what being Rosalind Gray feels like before I step onto the world stage as Chimera's CEO. Alara smiled sadly. You're scared the white suit will consume the cashmere turtleneck. I'm terrified that I'll start treating people like Axton treated me, Rosalind confessed. That I'll confuse power with worth. I saw the look on Axton's face. It was devastating. And I didn't feel remorse. I felt satisfied. I want to build a better empire, Alara. One based on respect. One where talent isn't crushed by ego. Alara gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. Then start here. Stay off the grid for 24 hours. No Micah, no Travis, no Chimera. Let's just fix something beautiful. The rest of the evening was spent in the dusty quiet of the restoration studio. Alara had been working on a centuries-old Dutch painting, a landscape whose varnish had darkened and yellowed over time. Rosalind, the quantum algorithm coder, spent hours mixing tiny batches of solvent, the precision demanded by the delicate work calming her fractured nerves. She was working on restoration, not destruction. She was fixing the past, not running from it. As dawn broke over the quiet street, painting the apartment in soft gold, Rosalind felt a sense of peace she hadn't known since she was a teenager. The grit of Axton's dirty water felt finally washed away, replaced by the faint scent of turpentine and the heavy, honest weight of self-acceptance. The phoenix was not just risen. It was meticulously repairing its broken feathers, one tiny, patient movement at a time. While Rosalind was finding solace in restoration, Axton Lowe was living a nightmare created by the woman he had scorned. His new office, at the newly renamed Chimera Tech, was a 6x8 windowless cube, tucked away in the least used corner of the second floor, the floor reserved for documentation archives. His desk was cheap particle board, and his computer was a refurbished model. Every piece of expensive furniture and art Axton had installed was now gone, replaced by minimalist, ergonomic designs favored by Chimera Global. His role? Junior acquisitions consultant, reporting directly to Micah Hunt. Micah, who had witnessed Axton's cruelty firsthand, treated him with a chilling, clinical professionalism. There were no outbursts, no emotional reaction, just unrelenting paperwork and impossible deadlines. On his first day, Micah assigned Axton the task of compiling a full inventory of every low-tech patent, the very patents Axton had claimed credit for but never truly understood. "Mr. Lowe," Micah had said, leaning casually against the doorframe, sipping a green smoothie. "I need detailed documentation on the original Chrysalis algorithm filing, specifically cross-referencing the time-stamped intellectual property claims with the initial seed funding paperwork. I need it by 5 p.m. Don't worry, the code is simple. You should be able to grasp the basic concepts." The condescension was palpable, delivered with a smile that never reached Micah's eyes. Axton, who had spent a decade swaggering through boardrooms, was now reduced to a glorified clerk, scrambling to understand the technical brilliance he had once dismissed as trivial. Adding to his misery was the public humiliation. The news of Low-Tech's acquisition by the mythical Phantom broke less than an hour after Rosalind's press conference. The business world was in shock, the narrative shifting instantly from Axton Lowe, the visionary, to Axton Lowe, the fraud. The Wall Street Journal headline read, "The Phantom haunts Low-Tech. Genius wife takes back her $10 billion algorithm." Forbes published a scathing op-ed titled, "The Fall of the Fraud: How Toxic Masculinity Cost Axton Lowe His Empire." Axton couldn't escape it. Every television in the building, including the small, cheap monitor on his desk, flashed Rosalind's image. Rosalind in the white suit, poised and powerful, accepting the applause of the world. The worst part was his personal life. His mother, Opal Vaughn, was staying at a mid-range airport hotel, having refused the 30-day guest house ultimatum. She called Axton 10 times a day, hysterical about the loss of her social standing and demanding he sue Rosalind for emotional distress. "She can't do this to me, Axton. I am Opal Vaughn. This hotel smells like cleaning products. You must fix this." Opal wailed over the phone. "She owns everything, Mother," Axton repeated, feeling a terrifying fatigue. "She owns the phone you're calling me on. She owns the company. She owns me." Haven Price's meltdown was even more spectacular. After being evicted from the mansion and having her credit cards frozen, as they were supplementary cards linked to Axton's accounts, she realized she had nothing but designer clothes and no place to wear them. She had tried showing up at Chimera Tech, demanding to see Axton. Axton heard the commotion from his cubicle. He walked out and saw Haven being gently but firmly escorted out by 2 large, polite security guards. "Axton, tell them who I am. I'm your fiancé. We were supposed to be royalty at the Apex Gala," Haven screamed, wrestling with the guards. Axton stood there, watching the security guards take away the woman he had planned to marry. For the first time, he saw her clearly. Shallow, dependent, and utterly useless in a crisis. She was the perfect reflection of the values he had prioritized. He didn't defend her. He simply walked back into his cubicle and closed the door. Alone in the dim light, Axton felt the weight of his downfall. He wasn't just broke, he was erased. He had built his entire identity on the lie of his genius and the subjugation of his wife. Now, the genius was proven stolen, and the wife was his boss. He opened the Chrysalis code file again. This time he didn't just look for errors. He tried to understand the elegance, the foresight, the sheer brilliance woven into its structure. It was sophisticated, beautiful, and fundamentally logical. It hit him with the force of a physical blow. Rosalind was better than him. She always had been. He hadn't just mistreated her, he had actively smothered the greatest source of brilliance he had ever known, all because his ego couldn't handle sharing the spotlight with a woman. Axton reached into his desk drawer and pulled out the divorce papers Travis had brought the night of the humiliation. Rosalind had never signed them. He realized now that she hadn't needed to. She had executed the divorce from his life not with a pen, but with a hostile corporate takeover. Slowly, Axton Lowe started to cry, not out of rage or self-pity, but out of a genuine, agonizing realization of his profound failure, a moment of reckoning that promised, perhaps, the smallest sliver of painful, difficult growth. 2 weeks later, the Apex Gala was the most highly anticipated social event of the year. It was the traditional venue for announcing the winner of the Project Helios initiative. In the glittering ballroom of the Metropolitan Museum, the energy was electric. Everyone was talking about the acquisition, the public dethroning of Axton Lowe, and the mysterious identity of the Phantom. Axton, stripped of his membership and his wealth, was nowhere in sight. Opal and Haven were reduced to watching the coverage on social media from a hotel bar downtown. At precisely 9 p.m., the Master of Ceremonies announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Principal of Chimera Global, who will announce the Project Helios winner, the incomparable Ms. Rosalind Gray." The crowd erupted. Rosalind walked onto the stage. She wasn't wearing white tonight, the uniform of the Avenger. She wore a stunning emerald green gown, simple and flowing, a symbol of growth and renewal. She wore minimal jewelry, a simple gold chain, and the only flash of light came from the quiet confidence in her eyes. She looked directly at the crowd, the financiers, the journalists, the competitors who had dismissed her for years. "Good evening." Rosalind's voice was amplified, clear, and steady. "For years, Chimera Global has been known as the Phantom. Tonight, I can tell you that the Phantom is a ghost no more." She paused, letting the statement hang in the air. The Phantom was a necessity. It was a digital fortress built in silence, designed to protect the true value of an idea. An idea stolen by my former husband, Axton Lowe, and used to finance a flawed empire. She looked directly at the camera, sending her message to the world. "I stand here tonight not as the wife, nor as the spy, but as Rosalind Gray, CEO of Chimera. My tenure here will be defined by 3 principles: resilience, authenticity, and connection. The Project Helios contract is monumental. It requires a partner with integrity, technical brilliance, and a culture of respect. That partner is Chimera Tech, the company we acquired, the company built on my original code, Chrysalis, and now restored to its ethical foundation." The audience burst into applause. This wasn't just a corporate announcement, it was a manifesto. Later, while navigating the swarm of admirers, Rosalind was intercepted by Travis Ward and Micah Hunt. "You stole the show, Principal," Micah said, handing her a glass of champagne. "The stock jumped 30% the moment you mentioned Chrysalis." "It's good code," Rosalind shrugged. Travis looked at her with an admiration that was deeper than professional respect. "You didn't just win, Rosalind. You changed the narrative. You didn't hide the humiliation. You leveraged it. That's real power." Rosalind's gaze softened. "Travis, thank you. You and Micah saved me. But you also taught me that the best connections are built on shared values, not shared trauma." "And what about Axton?" Micah asked, glancing at the headlines flashing on a screen nearby. Rosalind's face remained neutral. "Axton is still an employee. His probation ends in 2 months. He is doing the work I assigned him. He is finally learning the difference between a real asset and a superficial one." She had achieved her revenge, her fortune, and her freedom. But the most valuable thing she gained was the connection she had re-established with Ilara, and the quiet, steady connection with herself. She realized that the greatest resilience was not in fighting Axton, but in refusing to become him. She scanned the room, no longer searching for approval or fearing exposure. She was simply present. Later that evening, in a quiet corner away from the flashing lights, Rosalind pulled out her phone. She didn't call Micah or Travis. She texted Ilara a single word: fixed. Ilara replied instantly, "Beautiful." Rosalind smiled, the first truly relaxed, authentic smile Axton Lowe would never see. The dirty water was gone, but the lesson it left behind was a foundation of steel. She had reclaimed her empire, yes, but more importantly, she had reclaimed her soul. And so, Rosalind Gray proved that the most dangerous weapon is not wealth or rage, but quiet, calculated brilliance. She endured years of emotional abuse, not by running, but by secretly building an empire from the shadows, fueled by her own stolen ideas. Her story is a powerful reminder that resilience isn't just bouncing back, it's using the weight of oppression to anchor your ascent. Rosalind, the Phantom, found her true self only when she embraced her authenticity, proving that your worth is never defined by those who try to keep you small. If this story of ultimate corporate and personal revenge inspired you to stand taller, claim your worth, and build your own empire, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the quiet ones are often the most powerful. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that prove resilience always wins. Let us know in the comments. What would you do if you were the Phantom?